Welcome back. Welcome back. We getting back into our book club. How's everybody doing? I miss y'all. Thank you to my new subscribers. Please hit that like button. It keeps me in the app algorithm and it helps the channel to grow. Um, Comment, subscribe, share the video. That also helps the channel to grow. Well, we getting back into our 48 laws of power. Law 8. Make other people come to you. Now, I like this law. I like this law. Use bait if necessary. When you force the other person to act, you are the one in control. That's a fact. I like that. It is always better to make your opponent come to you, abandoning his plans in the process. Lure him with fabulous games, then attack. That's just remind me of the art of war. Keep your enemies close. They don't even know that they're an enemy. And they think that they slick, doing all kind of things to you, not knowing that you got an ulterior motive as well. You hold the cards. Oh, I'm liking this. Observance of the law. At the Congress of Vienna in 1814, the major powers of Europe gathered to carve up the remains of Napoleon's fallen empire. The city was full of gaiety, and the balls were the most splendid in memory. Hovering over the proceedings, however, was the shadow of Napoleon himself. Instead of being executed or exiled far away, he had been sent to the island of Elba, not far from the coast of Italy. Even imprisoned on an island, a man as bold and creative as Napoleon Bonaparte made everyone nervous. The Austrians plotted to kill him on Elba, but decided it was too risky. Alexander I, Russia's temporal czar, heightened the anxiety by throwing a fit during the Congress when a part of Poland was denied him. Beware, I shall loose the monster, he threatened. Everyone knew he meant Napoleon. Of all the statesmen gathered in Vienna, only Talleyrand, Napoleon's former foreign minister, seemed calm and unconcerned. It was as if he knew something the others did not. Meanwhile, on the island Elba, Napoleon's life was a mockery of his previous glory. As Elba's king, he had been allowed to form a court. There was a cook, a wardrobe mistress, an official pianist, and a handful of courtiers. All of this was designed to humiliate Napoleon, and it seemed to work. That winter, however, there occurred a series of events so strange and dramatic they might have been scripted to play. Elba was surrounded by British ships, their cannons covering all possible exits. Yet somehow, in broad daylight on February 26, 1815, a ship with 900 men on board picked up Napoleon and put to sea. The English gave chase, but the ship got away. This almost impossible escape astonished the public throughout Europe and terrified the statesmen at the Congress of Vienna. Although it would have been safe to leave Europe, Napoleon not only chose to return to France, he raised the odds by marching on Paris with a tiny army in hopes of recapturing the throne. His strategy worked. People of all classes threw themselves at his feet. An army under Marshal Ney sped from Paris to arrest him, but when the soldiers saw their beloved former leader, they changed sides. Napoleon was declared emperor again. Volunteers swelled the ranks of his new army. Delirium swept the country. In Paris, crowds went wild. The king who had replaced Napoleon fled the country. For the next 100 days, Napoleon ruled France. Soon, however, the giddiness subsided. France was bankrupt, its resources nearly exhausted, and there was little Napoleon could do about this. At the Battle of Waterloo in June that year, he was finally defeated for good. This time, his enemies had learned their lesson. They exiled him to a barren island of St. Helena off the coast of Africa. There, he had no more hope of escape. Only years later did the facts of Napoleon's dramatic escape from Elba come to light. Before he decided to attempt this bold move, visitors to his court had told him that he was more popular in France than ever, and that the country would embrace him again. One of these visitors was Austrian General Kohler, who convinced Napoleon that if he escaped, the European powers, England included, would welcome him back into power. Napoleon was tipped off that the English would let him go, and indeed his escape occurred in the middle of the afternoon in full view of English spyglasses. What Napoleon did not know was there was a man behind it all, pulling strings, and that man was his former minister, Talleyrand. And Talleyrand was doing all of this not to bring back the glory days, but to crush Napoleon once and for all. Wow! 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 Considering the emperor's ambition on selling to Europe stability, he had turned against him long ago. When Napoleon was exiled to Elba, Talleyrand had protested. Napoleon should be sent further away, he argued, or Europe would never have peace. But no one listened. Instead of pushing his opinion, Talleyrand bided his time. Working quiet, he eventually won over Castlereagh and Metternich, the foreign ministers of England and Austria. Together, these men baited Napoleon into escaping. Even Collier's visit or whisper the promise of glory in the exile's ear was part of the plan. Like a master card player, Talleyrand figured something out in advance. He knew Napoleon would fall into the trap he had set. He also foresaw that Napoleon would lead the country into war. Give France weakened condition could only last a few months. One diplomat in Vienna who understood that Talleyrand was behind it all said he would set the house ablaze in order to save it from the plague. When I have laid bait for deer, I don't shoot at the first doe that comes to sniff, but wait until the whole herd has gathered round. Message, like the movie. What's that movie? Being in South, don't be in South, being a menace in South Central while drinking the juice. Message, keys to power. How many times has this scenario played itself out in history? An aggressive leader initiates a series of bold moves that begin by bringing him much power. Slowly, however, his power reaches a peak and soon everything turns against him. His numerous enemies band together, trying to maintain his power. He exhausts himself going in this direction, and that inevitably he collapses. The reason for this pattern is that the aggressive person is rarely in full control. Damn. I gotta let that marinate. The reason for this pattern is that the aggressive person is rarely in full control. He cannot see more than a couple of moves ahead. Damn. Cannot see the consequences of this bold move or that one because he is constantly being forced to react to the moves of his ever growing host of enemies and to the unforeseen consequences of his own rash actions. His aggressive energy is turned against him. That's good. In the realm of power, you must ask yourself, what is the point of chasing here and there, trying to solve problems and defeat my enemies if I never feel in control? Why am I always have to react to events instead of directing them? That's a good question. The answer is simple. Your idea of power is wrong. You have mistaken aggressive action for effective action, and most often, the most effective action is to stay back, keep calm, and let others be frustrated by the traps you lay for them, playing for long term power rather than quick victory. That is good. Remember, the essence of power is the ability to keep the initiative to get others to react to your moves, to keep your opponent and those around you in the defensive. When you make other people come to you, you suddenly become the one controlling the situation, and the one who has the control has power. Two things must happen to place you in a position. You yourself must learn to master your emotion and never be influenced by anger. Damn, that, oh my God. I got a friend, and I tell her all the time, get out of your emotions. I taught my children, don't be in your emotions, because when you're in emotions, you make bad mistakes. You got to stay in control of your emotions. Oh my God. You yourself must learn to master your emotions and never be influenced by anger. Meanwhile, however, you must play on people's natural tendency to react angrily when pushed and baited. In the long run, the ability to make others to come to you is a weapon far more powerful than any tool of aggression. You damn right. Oh my God. Study how Talleyrand, the master art, performed this delicate trick. First, he overcame the urge to try to convince his fellow statesmen that they needed to banish Napoleon far away. It's only natural to want to persuade people by pleading your case, imposing your will with words. But this often turns against you. Few of Talleyrand's contemporaries believed Napoleon was still a threat, so that if he had spent a lot of energy trying to convince them, he would only have made himself look foolish. Instead, he held his tongue and his emotions in check. Most important of all, he laid Napoleon a sweet, irresistible trap. He knew the man's weakness, his impetuosity, his need for glory and the love of masses, and he played all this to perfection. When Napoleon went for the bait, there was no danger that he might succeed and turn the tables on Talleyrand, who better than anyone knew France's depleted state. And even had Napoleon been able to overcome these difficulties, the likelihood of his success would have been able to overcome these difficulties. Oh, wait a minute. The likelihood of his success would have been greater where were he able to choose his time and place of action. By setting the proper trap, Talleyrand took the time and place into his own hands. All of us have only so much energy, and there's a moment when your energies are at their peak. When you make the other person come to you, he wears himself out, wasting his energy on the trip. In the year 1905, Russia and Japan were at war. The Japanese had only recently begun to modernize their warships so that the Russians had a stronger navy, but the spreading false information, the Japanese Marshal Togo baited the Russians into leaving their docks in the Baltic Sea, making they believe that they could wipe out Japanese fleet in one attack. The Russian fleet could not reach Japan by the quickest route through the Strait of Gibraltar and then the Suez Canal into the Indian Ocean because they were controlled by the British and Japan was an ally of Great Britain. They had to go around the Cape of Good Hope at the tip of Africa, adding over more than 6,000 miles to voyage. Once the fleet passed the Cape, the Japanese spread another false story. They were sailing to launch a counterattack, so the Russians made the entire journey to Japan on combat alert. By the time they arrived, their seamen were tense, exhausted, and overworked, while the Japanese had been waiting at ease. Despite the odds, their lack of experience in modern naval warfare, the Japanese crushed the Russians. One added benefit of making an opponent come to you, as the Japanese discovered with Russians, is that it forces him to operate in your territory. Damn. Being on hostile ground will make him nervous, and often he will rush his actions and make mistakes. For negotiations or meetings, it is always wise to lure others into your territory or the territory of your choice. You have your bearings, while they see nothing familiar and subtly placed on the defensive. Manipulation is a dangerous game. Once someone suspects he is being manipulated, it becomes harder and harder to control him. But when you make your opponent come to you, you create the illusion that he is controlling the situation. Damn, that's good. He does not feel the strings that pull him, just as Napoleon imagined that he himself was the master of his daring escape and return to power. Everything depends on the sweetness of your bait. If your trap is attractive enough, the turbulence of your enemy's emotions and desires will blind them into reality. The greedier they become, the more they can be led around. Damn, that's good. Wow. If you can get people to dig their own graves, why sweat yourself? Pickpockets work this to a perfection. They keep the key to picking a pocket is knowing which pocket contains the wallet. The key experienced pickpockets often ply their trade in train stations or other places where there is clearly a marked sign saying beware of pickpockets. Passerby seeing the sign invariably feel for their wallet to make sure it's still there. For the watching pickpockets, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. Pickpockets have even been known to place their own beware pickpocket signs to ensure their success. Wow. When you are making people come to you, it is sometimes better to let them know you are forcing their hand. You give up deception for overt manipulation. The psychological ramifications are profound. The person who makes others come to him appears powerful and demands respect. If on one occasion you make it a point of dignity that others must come to you, you succeed. They will continue to do so even after you stop trying. Although it's generally, excuse me, although it is generally the wiser policy to make others exhaust themselves chasing you, there are opposite cases when striking suddenly and aggressively at the enemy so demoralizes him that his energy sinks. Instead of making others come to you, you go to them. Force the issue, take the lead. First attack can be awesome weapon, for it forces the other person to react without the time to think or plan. With no time to think, people make errors of judgment and are thrown on the defensive. This tactic is the obverse of waiting and baiting, but it serves, excuse me, but it serves the same function. You make your enemy respond on your own terms. That is good. Men like Caesar Borgia, and that's the man who's the picture of Jesus. That's him, Caesar Borgia, homosexual and a murderer. And Napoleon used the element of speed to intimidate and control. A rapid and unforeseen move is terrifying and demoralizing. You must choose your tactics depending on the situation. If you have time on your side and know that you and your enemies are at least at equal strength, then deplete their strength by making them come to you. If time is against you, your enemies are weaker, and waiting will only give them a chance to recover. Give them no such chance. Strike quickly, and they have nowhere to go. As the boxer Joe Louis put it, he can run, but he can't hide. Damn, that was good. That was good. That was good. Wait a minute. Oh, shit, that's the wrong thing. I wanted to add something to this, and then I'm done. So this chapter basically talks about the strategic advantage of controlling a situation and making your opponent um, react to your actions and make them come to you. By forcing others to come to you, you maintain the control and the power over that individual. You know, I thought this was good. When you make others react to your actions, you are in control. They are constantly responding to your moves, which can be draining and prevent them from implementing their own plans. Use bait and lure. That's what it says. This strategy requires patience. It's not about immediate aggression, but rather about setting traps and allowing your opponent to fall for them. By making others react to you, you maintain the initiative and force them to operate with what you want them to do. Then you can create the illusion that your opponent is controlled, but the fact is, you in control. Wow, that was a good chapter. I like that. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment.